biggest party for 50 years, and you're invited. There are 4 days of special programmes, events, live music and 2 massive concerts at the Palace. So celebrate with the BBC from the 1st to the 4th of June. Jubilee 2002. We're bringing the music to the party.
What is the point of you being here, eh? You're never straight with me. I've had enough!
Oh, look, you've crashed.
Stop computer abuse. Use the new BBC Eye web search. BBC Eye, the search is over.
The news and sport on BBC One Scotland now with Peter Sissons and Rob Bonnet.
Railtrack say the Potters Bar crash was caused by points failure. They found that nuts had come off, but they don't know why. The Prince of Wales visits the survivors. 3 remain critical. Camilla's first public speech, and in royal company too. And Rangers and Celtic will be asked to play in the English First Division next season. Good evening. Yesterday's rail tragedy at Potters Bar, in which 7 people died, was caused by points failure. Railtrack tonight said the points had moved as the train passed over them because the nuts on key supports had inexplicably become detached. 400 similar points have been checked and no other defects have been found. Gavin Hewitt reports from the scene of the crash.
All day, the meticulous search of the track had continued, with police officers examining minute fragments of metal. But by midday, investigators already knew a great deal about what had caused this accident. The points just outside Potters Bar station, now covered by a tent, had failed, derailing the 4th carriage, sending it flying down the platform.
We've now come to a likely conclusion that there was a fracture in one of the supports called a front stretcher bar as the train passed over them, which caused the points to move, and that is what caused the train to derail.
Some of the nuts that should have been securing the points had become detached. Railtrack still don't know why. They say there was a visual inspection of this set of points as recently as last Thursday, and no defects were found. But they have already begun examining the maintenance records. Inspections have started at other sets of points across the country, but so far no other problems have been found. Railtrack has concluded that this was probably a one-off event and there will be no speed restrictions as a result of this accident. Earlier, the Secretary of State for Transport, Stephen Byers, had visited the crash scene. Although he cautioned against a rush to judgment, he knows questions are likely to be asked again about the management of the railways. Can you reassure the public that the rail network is safe?
Well, I think it's very difficult in a situation like this to say very strongly that the rail network is safe, but if you compare it to other forms of travel, then yes, rail travel is one of the safest forms. Nevertheless, when something like this happens, we've got to do all that we can to reassure the public.
During the day, relatives of those who died here have been visiting the crash scene. Other people have come and laid flowers. Among the messages, there was one from Railtrack. It just said, "With deepest sympathy." Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Potters Bar.
Police have begun naming those who lost their lives in the crash. And this afternoon, the Prince of Wales visited the survivors in hospital at Barnet and Chase Farm. From there, Clarence Mitchell reports.
At Barnet Hospital, the Prince of Wales arrived to meet some of the senior medical staff who'd responded so rapidly to help the injured and the dying. Prince Charles was also there to comfort some of the victims himself. Inside, in private, he met 2, recovering now and in a stable condition. Others, though, remained on the critical list. The Prince emerged to tell the BBC he'd been horrified to hear the news of the accident.
Well, I suspect, like many other people, my heart stood still, but then it obviously went out to all the families and the loved ones of those who'd lost their relations in this terrible accident.
And having met staff and patients here today, what are your thoughts now?
Well, I can never get over how wonderful all the people are in these hospitals and the work they do and the emergency services and the fact that they're there so quickly.
One survivor, this 21-year-old student, appreciated the Prince's visit. He told him he'd felt 2 jolts before being thrown into the seats ahead of him as the carriage spun, injuring his chest.
The carriage had fallen over. You could see other people getting out through the broken window. But I was completely winded and sort of had to wait, try and catch my breath. Eventually managed to pull myself up using the seats and the luggage rack, which wasn't above my head anymore. Managed to drop myself out through the window.
For the victims and their carers, it was a morale-boosting visit in the aftermath of tragedy. Clarence Mitchell, BBC News, Barnet.
Well, as you heard earlier, investigations are continuing into how the points failure occurred and whether it could have been prevented. Our transport correspondent Tom Simons examines the evidence that's come to light.
This piece of footage we've obtained shows the approach to Potters Bar as the driver would see it. Look closely at the tracks, where they seem to cross at the points in question. These railway junctions are automatically controlled from a computerized signal box. They rarely fail. But this time, something went wrong. The investigators have now gathered enough evidence to at least partly explain how the train derailed so disastrously. And it was the points just 200 yards from Potters Bar they were most interested in. If they'd have been working properly, the train should have run straight through the station. With several nuts missing, the points collapsed as the 4th carriage passed over, throwing it off the rails. But the big question now is, why were those bolts missing? And that is what the investigators will now focus on. Could there have been a maintenance failure? Were the loose nuts properly replaced after the work was done? The points were inspected as recently as Thursday. Was that check carried out correctly? Or, and it's distinctly possible, did someone vandalise the points by loosening the nuts? If there were maintenance failures, Railtrack will face even more anger than it did following the Hatfield crash.
Now, this would be an extraordinary lapse, a very basic failure in maintenance, and clearly it would raise concerns about similar points across the network.
With that in mind, Railtrack's already inspected 400 sets of points around the country. But what everyone involved will want to avoid is more disruption to passengers. Their confidence has already been shaken enough. Tom Simons, BBC News.
And our special correspondent Gavin Hewitt is at the scene of the crash now. Gavin, another way of looking at the evidence is that it was just a freak accident. Is that the way it looks there tonight? And if it was, does that get Railtrack off the hook?
Well, they believe it was a freak accident, but they will want to examine very carefully the maintenance records. I mean, how thorough, for instance, were these recent inspections? And Railtrack knows that many people will ask, after all the turbulence of recent months, whether they allowed safety standards to drop. I mean, the head of Railtrack said today that over the past 6 months, he had seen no evidence that safety standards had been compromised. But I think the travelling public will need to hear much more information before they're convinced this was indeed a one-off event that has no greater significance for the rail network. And I think next week, the Secretary of State for Transport, Stephen Byers, will face very searching questions. So I do think it's far too early to say either the government or indeed Railtrack are really off the hook for this one.
Gavin Hewitt, thank you. Now, other news. Prince Charles's companion, Camilla Parker Bowles, has made her first public speech. She's addressed an international conference on the brittle bone disease osteoporosis in the Portuguese capital, Lisbon. The disease blighted the lives of both her mother and her grandmother.
This was her boldest foray yet onto the public stage, and she found it painfully nerve-wracking. Watched by Prince Charles's spin doctor, Mrs. Parker Bowles joined a high-profile forum headed by Queen Rania of Jordan, demanding international action on osteoporosis. She looked like a lamb to the slaughter, aware of the intense media interest in a voice that most people have never heard. But she spoke clearly and movingly about her mother's fight against the disease.
In her latter years, she could not breathe without oxygen, or even totter round her beloved garden on her Zimmer frame. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that the quality of her life became so dismal and her suffering so unbearable that she just gave up the fight and lost the will to live.
It was that experience that made her join the charity. And today she threw down the gauntlet to the government for more bone scanners, more nursing staff and more funds.
It is imperative that all of us at this IOF conference today get this message across to our governments and health authorities by whatever means we can.
From such nervous beginnings, it was an eloquent performance, but her relief that it was over was all too clear. Camilla Parker Bowles is now a woman with a voice, and one that's prepared to be heard, at least on an issue like this to which she is so deeply committed. That in itself is going to alter the way the British public perceive her.
And Jenny Bond joins us from Lisbon now. Jenny, it looks as if it was all carefully orchestrated. Camilla speaks for a good cause, in a human way and in royal company. But do you think it was still a bit of a gamble?
Oh, I think it was a gamble. I think quite a lot of the people out here on the town tonight in Lisbon, she probably needed quite a stiff drink afterwards. I think there's been an element of the Wicked Witch of the West about Camilla in the public mind's eye in the past, but now she's a woman of more substance, someone with a real voice, someone, as we know, can speak with a good deal of compassion about a condition that affects an awful lot of people, you know. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 12 men over 50 are affected by osteoporosis. In the past couple of years, I think she probably would have been shot down in flames had she dared to speak out. But now those around her, including Prince Charles, who rang her this morning to encourage her, rang a couple of times, felt that she could put her head above the parapet, and it went very well.
Jenny Bond, thank you. British forces in southeastern Afghanistan have simultaneously destroyed 4 al-Qaeda caves full of ammunition. The controlled explosion is believed to be the biggest of its kind since the Second World War and left craters 100 feet deep. Tens of thousands of Israelis demonstrated in Tel Aviv tonight calling for peace with the Palestinians. Ariel Sharon's government still has its troops ready to attack the Gaza Strip in retaliation for last week's suicide bomb, but for the moment it seems to have put off any attack. Here, the Labour Party has become embroiled in yet another row over political donations, this time involving the publisher Richard Desmond. Details that will be outlined in the newspapers tomorrow. Our political correspondent Laura Trevelyan is at Westminster. Laura, not another Labour donation story that's about to blow up. What's it about?
Well, Peter, the allegation in tomorrow's newspapers is that Richard Desmond, he's the proprietor of Express Newspapers, a man who built his fortune in the adult entertainment industry. The allegation is that he gave £100,000 to Labour in February last year. That's just days before new legislation came into force requiring all donations to be made public via the Electoral Commission. Now, Labour are saying the idea that they hid this donation from Mr Desmond is complete nonsense, because it's due to be published in their accounts later this year and also in the accounts of Mr Desmond. However, the Conservatives say that there are real questions to be asked about the relationship between Labour and between Mr Desmond, and they are calling for an inquiry. And of course, it comes off the back of a whole series of scandals, or if you like, allegations about Labour receiving money from rich people.
Laura Trevelyan, thank you. Now, with news of important developments for Celtic and Rangers in their efforts to join English football, plus action from the final day of the Premiership season, here's Rob Bonnet.
Peter, thanks. Good evening to you. Well, the BBC has learnt that the English Football League plans next week to formally invite Glasgow's Big Two clubs to join its First Division from the beginning of next season. Celtic and Rangers currently dominate Scottish football, which is in a mess following the recent resignation from the Premier League of its other 10 clubs. Finance, too, is at the heart of this issue. There are currently no contracts in place for the television coverage of the game in Scotland next season. Well, live now to our business editor, Jeff Randall, who's at Football League headquarters in central London. Jeff, we've heard rumours of this story before, haven't we? What gives it real substance this time?
Yes, good evening, Rob. Yes, you're quite right. There have been rumours of this story before, but this time I really do think it's for real. I understand that last week in Scotland on Thursday, David Murray, the Rangers chairman, Dermot Desmond, the Celtic's biggest shareholder, and Keith Harris, the chairman of the Football League, they met in a secret hideaway, I think it may have been David Murray's house, to thrash out a plan to invite the old firm, Rangers and Celtic, into the Football League next season. Now, what I understand is this, that on Thursday here in London at this building, the Football League's headquarters, one of the clubs friendly to the deal will make that proposal to invite Rangers and Celtic down, and the Football League's executive committee will say, yes, we go along with it. But that's not the end of the matter, because the next day here in London again, the entire membership of the Football League will gather and they will have to vote on it, and it's possible that they will vote it down. Frankly, I don't think they will. I think they'll go along with this. But even then, it's not the end of the matter, because there are many other parties that will object to this. The Scottish Premier League will hate it. They will say that Rangers and Celtic have a contractual obligation to stay in Scotland for another 2 years. And then you've got UEFA, a body I know you know well. They will not like this at all. They fear that this will be the crumbling of their power base, because if Rangers and Celtic play in England, what's to stop the Portuguese sides playing in Spain and the Belgian sides playing in Germany?
Jeff Randall at Football League headquarters, thanks for joining us. Well, the remaining issues at the top and bottom of the English Premiership were settled today at Anfield with a 5-0 win for Liverpool over visitors Ipswich. The result left Liverpool as runners-up with an automatic Champions League place for next season, but sent Ipswich back into the First Division 2 years after getting promotion.
The Ipswich fans travelled more in hope than expectation. To remain in the Premiership, their team had to win and Sunderland had to lose their match against Derby.
They need a big miracle, a massive miracle.
But it didn't happen. Just 12 minutes into the game, and this goal from John Arne Riise gave Liverpool the lead. Cheered on by their supporters, Ipswich came close with a header from Darren Bent. But despite having slightly less of the first half possession, it was Liverpool who scored a second. Another excellent strike from Riise. After the break, Michael Owen extended the Liverpool lead before a fine solo effort by Vladimir Smicer made it 4-0. Liverpool needed this win to ensure second place in the Premiership above Manchester United. It was Nicolas Anelka who clinched it, 5-0 to Liverpool, relegation for Ipswich.
Gutted. I really thought we could do it.
We had chances, but we don't put them away, do we? The difference between Liverpool and us, they've got the sharpshooters, we haven't.
We'll come back, we'll be strong. We're going to hopefully get the results back next season.
So a dismal weekend already for Ipswich, and it could get worse. Their bitterest rivals, Norwich, are in a playoff final tomorrow. If they win it, they'll replace Ipswich in the Premier League. Kevin Bouquet, BBC News, Anfield.
At Highbury, meanwhile, Arsenal celebrated the Premiership title they won in midweek with a 4-3 win over Everton. Thierry Henry scored twice and so won the league's Golden Boot award as leading scorer with 24 goals. But amidst the party atmosphere, there was a goodbye from fullback and former England international Lee Dixon, who'd earlier announced his retirement.
Not a bad way to bow out. Lee Dixon ending a hugely successful club career with the honour of leading out the double winners. Arsenal remarkably have scored in every game this season, and none have been easier than the one Everton gifted Dennis Bergkamp after only 3 minutes. Simple, only it wasn't quite, because with so many luminaries on the bench, the Arsenal defence was to prove less than its usual solid self. Lee Carsley the beneficiary. 10 minutes later, the champagne looked like turning sour before being uncorked as Redzinski was somehow allowed to pick his spot.
Finding the goal.
As so often, though, the Gunners had ammunition to spare. Bergkamp's muscled intervention was leniently allowed, and Thierry Henry ensured full value. He got a second midway through the second half before supplying the cross from which Francis Jeffers signalled the start of a giant Highbury party.
He's pretty much made sure that
And it will be roistering still now as the Gooners celebrate capturing the season's most valuable silverware, while Manchester United and the hated rivals Tottenham finish empty-handed.
So a triumphant end to a magnificent season for Arsenal, who'll now be hoping to go one better in Europe next season. But their fans may care to reflect that some of those responsible for their success may well be lining up against England in the World Cup this summer. Kevin Geary, BBC News at Highbury.
Well, amongst the results elsewhere, wins for Blackburn, Aston Villa, Leeds, Leicester, Southampton and West Ham, while Manchester United versus Charlton and Sunderland v Derby both ended as draws. Arsenal finally won the league by 7 points from Liverpool, with Manchester United third, their worst finish for 11 years. They'll have to pre-qualify for next season's Champions League along with Newcastle. Ipswich finished in the bottom 3, 4 points below Sunderland, a real reverse from last season when they finished 5th from top. Well, there are serious concerns this evening about the fitness of England World Cup squad member Kieran Dyer, who was stretchered off during Newcastle's game at Southampton. He'll have a scan on his injured knee tomorrow. Better news for David Beckham, though. 2 days after visiting Downing Street, he's revealed that his injured left foot has recovered sufficiently for him to be able to run, and that he's signed a 3-year contract extension with Manchester United worth a reported £90,000 a week. Stoke City have won promotion to the First Division, beating Brentford 2-0 at the Millennium Stadium. Dean Burton gave Stoke a 16th minute lead before Brentford forward Ben Burgess completed his side's defeat, deflecting the ball into his own net just before half-time. Stoke are the first football team to win from the previously jinxed South dressing room. Michael Schumacher has had to settle for 3rd place on the grid for tomorrow's Austrian Grand Prix, the only event on the calendar which he hasn't yet won. His Ferrari teammate Rubens Barrichello took pole position with the fastest qualifying lap today. Ralf Schumacher will start in 2nd place, whilst Juan Pablo Montoya starts 4th. And finally, news of recalls for 4 England cricketers. Alex Stewart, John Crawley, Alex Tudor and Dominic Cork are all in the squad to play Sri Lanka at Lord's in the first test, which starts on Thursday. That's it, Peter.
Rob, thank you. Now, after 21 years, the final curtain is going down this evening on Cats, the longest-running musical in London's West End. Thousands of people who'd failed to get tickets gathered outside to watch the show, broadcast live on giant screens. Our arts correspondent Rosie Millard joined them in Covent Garden.
Well, Peter, behind me on stage is Trevor Nunn, the original director of Cats. There are hundreds of Cats fans here in the piazza at Covent Garden, all ready to give this old cat a very good send-off.
Just around the corner at the New London Theatre, Lord Lloyd Webber arrived early for tonight's show, while devotees of his music were readying themselves for the end of a phenomenon.
Just because it's so original, we have the interaction with the cast members, and it's just amazing music and good atmosphere, and it's really entertaining.
This is the last day I have to be here, all the way from Germany. I had to come.
Cats was the first of a vogue for quirky British musicals exported around the world. It didn't matter that there was no plot, the music was an instant hit, and the mould-breaking look eminently copyable. The show cemented stardom for one of its original cast members.
I think whenever something finishes, you know, there's a slight sadness about it, really. But on the other hand, I'm thrilled and very proud to have been part of such a wonderful piece of theatre history.
Will be members of the original cast, including Elaine Page, who will be joining the curtain call and remembering that first night 21 years ago. Peter.
Rosie Millard, thank you. And the main news tonight. Railtrack has said points failure was to blame for yesterday's fatal rail crash in which 7 people died. That's the latest. There'll be news throughout the night over on BBC News 24. But from Rob and me, good night.
Fighting for the right to die, terminally ill Diane Pretty tells her story in Panorama tomorrow night on BBC One Scotland at 10:15.
Hello, good evening. It's been a fine day for most of us during today, and there's more warm sunshine to come during tomorrow. But before then, well, it's going to be a cold night tonight, and then it's all changed for the beginning of next week, turning wet and windy. But at least it's a mild south or southwesterly wind. Now today we had very mixed fortunes along the south coast of England. 19 degrees at Thorney Island, the warmest place in the country, but about an inch of rain fell at Plymouth from some very slow moving showers and a funnel cloud reported near Exeter. Those showers are fading away. We're going to keep some showers though across northern parts of Scotland tonight and tomorrow. And further south you can see this low cloud affecting some eastern parts of England, particularly East Anglia and the southeast. That'll be there overnight, so frost free here, but elsewhere it's going to be a jolly cold night, widespread ground frost and a local air frost as well. So a bit of a chilly start for Sunday, but a fine start for most of us. That low cloud tending to break up. We've got to watch out for 1 or 2 showers to feed up from the southeast, and 1 or 2 of those could well be on the sharp side, but for many of us a pleasant enough day. Fairly light winds away from the north of Scotland and feeling warm in the sunshine, 17 or 18 degrees. But make the most of it. It's all changed for the beginning of next week. Heading our way is this lot here. A lot of clouds and rain too. It'll be into western areas during Sunday night. Continuing eastwards on Monday, some heavy bursts of rain, some showers following into the southwest. Then for Tuesday, it's a case of sunshine and showers quite heavy in the north. That's it. I'll see you tomorrow.
As Glasgow hosts the Champions League final, BBC Scotland celebrates football's golden age.
Magnificent!
At Hampden Park in 1960, Real Madrid lifted the European Cup in an unforgettable 10-goal encounter.
That's Puskas. And another one!
Players and fans, old and new, relive the greatest game.
It just started well and got better and better.
Tonight at 11:15 on BBC One Scotland.
Now on BBC One Scotland, tonight's lottery results. In the National Lottery draw, the 6 winning numbers are confirmed as 1, 25, 27, 35, 43 and 46, and the bonus number is 22. Early indications show that there are 3 lucky jackpot winners, each winning just over £2.4 million. The winning numbers in the lottery extra draw are 2, 11, 14, 31, 38 and 49. Initial reports show that there are no winners tonight, which means the jackpot for the next draw has grown to an estimated £11.4 million. The National Lottery Thunderball numbers are confirmed as 1, 9, 19, 22 and 25, and the Thunderball is 8.
Great heroes will come from the 4 corners of the earth to compete for the greatest prize known to man. Live on BBC One, BBC Radio 5 Live, and interactive on BBC I. World Cup 2002.
You're listening to BBC Radio 5 Live.
The winning team from the BBC.
Did you know how easy it is to watch almost all your favourite BBC programmes with subtitles? From award-winning drama and comedy to films, sports coverage, and the local and national news. You can find subtitles for all sorts of programmes on CFAX page 888. Or if you're a digital viewer, simply select subtitles from the menu. Log on to bbc.co.uk/info for more details.